continue with codecs and video players. The first player I wanted to point out is the KMPlayer. If you scroll down, the Wikipedia entry will actually tell you it is called that for the K-Multimedia Player. There's a number of different locations you can get it to. The site itself does not actually have a download location. It will actually direct you to other places. The one that I have to point out that you may want to avoid is the softonic.com location, simply because you're not actually getting the installer, you're getting a smaller installer that will attempt to go online and download the full executable, and it will save it to some other location on your computer. The filehippo.com one is a little bit more useful. It gives you the option of being able to select older versions when you are selecting the download. I have to point out that this newest one, the 3.1.00R2, is only a few months old, but it is slightly buggy, and if you were to scroll down through the comments, you would be able to see that the 1442 version is still a more easily usable one. So just to minimize this and go to the installation folder, you can see I have the both of them here. After some experimentation, I have to agree that the 1442 version is a lot easier to use. The R2 version installation is full of advertisements for trying to get you to redirect your home page and install a number of toolbars. In my case, it installed 2 toolbars for the same product. And so I'm just going to run the earlier, older version, which is a little bit more stable and has an easier time opening files. To continue with next, some of these are self-explanatory. The codecs you will want to use, the extender file, will allow you to have different effects for audio and video, being able to have certain effects during playback. I don't need to worry about the start menu and desktop shortcuts because I'm installing over an existing installation again, and I don't use skins as much as other users may, but you may want to have this checked. You can install these yourselves later. The set to interlock default file does not necessarily explain itself at all, so you may or may not want to have it on. I choose not to. For now, I'm going to click Next and install to the default location. As I mentioned earlier, the KMPlayer and other video players can run from a flash drive, and instead of having to write itself to a registry, you can be able to install it to a portable folder. In this case, you could, say, install it to a flash drive, take it to a friend's computer, and be able to open any given media file or audio file on their computer without having to run an installation on it. This would be useful if you do not have administrator access, and you wouldn't be able to edit or add programs. So here we see it's trying to get me to change the home page and add a toolbar, so I'm just going to decline this and choose to run the KMPlayer. Now when it first begins, it's going to open with this wizard, which will allow me to keep a default setting as if it was run from out of the box. If I was existing, or if I had a pre-existing installation, I could choose to keep the existing settings, but for now I'm going to choose the user-defined settings so that you'll be able to see the different settings you can be able to customize. Now, you can be able to specify the amount of processing power you can have the player use. For general use, it is recommended. If you wanted good quality, you can be able to improve the picture quality, but at the expense of a huge amount of processing power. This may not be useful if you are running on an older machine like I am, in which case you can just use the general use. If you wanted to have a performance issue, you can be able to run the video a lot smoother, but it wouldn't look as nice. So having general use is a good trade-off between aesthetics and playback speed. Another way to ensure good playback speed is to have the player running above normal. This would be the same thing as going down to the Process Explorer, right-clicking on the executable, the KMPlayer, and setting the priority to above normal, normal, etc. In this way, you can also use it to other programs to be able to minimize how much processing power the others are using. You will want to use the internal decoders just so that the KMPlayer isn't searching all over your hard drive to be able to find what codecs it needs to decode certain files. If you need to, though, you can be able to customize those yourself later within the program's options menu. If you are not a big fan of subtitles, or you just don't use them that much, you can be able to leave all of these options as they are. Subtitles can be toggled on or off within the player itself. Now in this case, if you are using either headphones or a pair of desktop-styled speakers, you can use the default 2-channel option. You can also be able to customize it to have a number of surround sound options. For now, I'm just going to hit Next. The general appearance of the player, I prefer to have it as the black modern style because the white one can be a little bit heavier on the eyes and cause eye strain from prolonged use. For now, I'm just going to click next. If you wanted to, you could add customizable skins yourself. The same thing applies for album art, because I am going to be using most of the KMPlayer's usage for media files as movies instead of audio files. I don't need to worry about album art being displayed in the background. So for now, I'll hit next. These two instances are of the checkboxes you may want to check yourself. This will just allow you to scale the image, and it will keep the aspect ratio between width and height the same. If you wanted to, you could allow multiple instances and have multiple files playing it simultaneously. This may or may not be a good thing depending on the size and types of the files you have. The seek method will determine how the player will move left or right on the time bar. If I wanted to move forward exactly 5 seconds, I would be able to choose the accurate seek. Otherwise, it will seek quickly by jumping to the nearest keyframe, although if you wanted to be specific in moving an exact amount of time forward or backward, you would have to choose accurate, so I'll just use that. The file opening method by default will go to opening all similar files of the same extension. So if I have an entire folder full of .avi files, it will open every single one of them, and as soon as one is done, it will begin playing the next. I prefer to have it open only one file at a time, as opposed to opening all similar files or every single file in the folder that is compatible with the KMPlayer. Now, as far as compatibility with the KMPlayer, you can choose to have a default or be the default player for any number of these programs or these files. The thing to point out, though, is that while it can play Adobe Flash files such as .flv files, we'll see here in a minute that I have an example of that, the SWF files may or may not be open depending on both the age of the file and how the file was prepared or encoded. If you were, for example, to download and try and play a Flash game within the KMPlayer, it may not run properly, or it may run too fast, or it may just give you a black screen and you have to close out of the player. I'll just leave those as default and choose to finish this. Now that the player is finished, I can choose to run once the wizard is done. So now I'll drag and drop this .flv file into the KMPlayer. I could also have double-clicked on the file itself. And I shall pause it here just to demonstrate one of the functions. I'm not going to play the file because trying to play a movie while recording another movie at the same time is very, very memory intensive and causes audio and video sync issues. It will be out of sync and you wouldn't be able to see what the video is displaying properly. At this point, I wanted to point out one of the advantages that the KMPlayer has. If, for example, I scroll to any part in the timeline and press Ctrl E, which is the capture command, it will allow me to save a screenshot of whatever I'm currently looking at in the current size. You can see that it supports a number of different files such as JPEG, bitmap, and PNGs, which is portable net graphics. Depending on which one of these you choose, you can have a certain quality of the file, so for now I'm just going to leave it as the default PNG. And so now if I go to the staging folder where it kept that, we can see it saved a screenshot of that particular frame in the video file. That's just one of the advantages that the KMPlayer has. You could also go to the options. In this case, you can see there are several of them. Subtitles, audio, video, plugins, etc. Several of them that probably would warrant having their own video. I'm not going to go through them all at this time. Leaving them on their default settings is usually good enough for most everyone who uses the KMPlayer. So for now, I'm just going to exit the KMPlayer. And next we'll move on to the VLC, or the Video LAN Movie Player.